Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having breakfast at Ruby's on this day. It's a very cold day here in Portugal, so thankfully I have two wonderful friends to join me and to give me some company on this very cold, cold day. For people who don't know, Breakfast at Ruby's is a weekly podcast and we just talk about things. I just invite a couple of folks over. We get to know each other. We get reacquainted. We catch up. It depends on whoever I have on, you know. It's usually a good excuse to talk to people that I enjoy. So, you know, that's also a thing. To my left, if you're watching the video version on Twitch or YouTube at Project Ruby, you can see that to my left, I have BadAndyWrites. Hi.
Hi.
Do you want to introduce yourself just briefly for the folks who may not know?
It's so funny because like you stream all the time, and then when it comes to things like this, like introducing yourself is just it seems so I don't know.
Yeah.
My name is BadAndyWrites. Y'all can call me Andy for sure. Short. I go by he/him pronouns, and I am a Seattle streamer. I'm a variety caster, so I play many different kinds of games, mostly story-driven games, because one of my favorite things to do with my streaming community is to share my writing, which I do off-stream, but I edit live on stream, so that's kind of my thing.
Yes. There you go. To my right, we have Cheratomo. Hi.
Hi.
Yes. Same thing applies. Feel free to introduce your wonderful self to all the wonderful folks watching and listening.
Well, I am Kara. I go by Cheratomo online. I'm a narrative designer for video games and a writer, as well as a variety streamer on Twitch. I usually play cozy and chill games, and then I also like to play narrative-based games and kind of dissect the narrative from my professional perspective.
Yes, I love that. So such variety, but also so similar. This wasn't really planned. I wasn't like, this is going to be the writer's episode because listen, reading for me, it may or may not be a challenge, Did I just mistake cheese for cheesecake earlier on stream? Maybe so. Maybe that was a thing that happened. But it's fine. This is a thing. I'm not going to, say things that are going to be bad because there was a previous episode and I had Jeff Brutlag on and I just said something like, oh, who reads anyway, right? Like within the conversation. And he was like,
No.
as a writer, I feel attacked. And I was like, that's valid. That's valid. It doesn't take away from your wonderful talents. It's just that I'm lazy. I'm just a lazy person. But yeah, these two wonderful folks, we got acquainted through Rainbow Arcade, a stream team that we're a part of. So in order for us to get to Rainbow Arcade, we obviously had to be content creators. So I actually want to ask both of you to get a little bit of a background on how you kind of got started. Just being a creative person, making content out there on the internet. We can start with Kara this time.
I got started making games back when I was 20 with Asagao Academy Normal Boots Club. And then from there, I branched out into a lot of different things, one of which was my own podcast called the Stuck Together Podcast. And my co-host one day casually suggested that I try streaming because he was like, "You're really funny," and I was like, "I don't think I'm really funny though." So I gave it a shot just to see what it was like, and I ended up loving it, and that was almost 4 years ago now.
Yes.
So that is how I got started.
I love that. And in a little bit of a full circle moment, I was a listener of that podcast.
What?
Oh, yeah. I had, needless to say, when I joined Rainbow Arcade and I saw Kara, a part of the member list, I kind of fangirled a little bit. I'm not going to lie. Not even going to lie. And now it's that moment of like, we are peers and we're in the same podcast. How wild is that? So that's wonderful. But yeah, how did you get started, Andy?
First of all, that's a really cute story. I'm glad you shared that. How did I get started? Streaming or like in general? I'll start with streaming. I got started streaming only a year ago, so it's a very new adventure for me. I've been on Twitch for like as a user for oh god, pretty much since not when it was Justin TV, but right after that era when it was renamed and rebranded as Twitch. I got on Twitch and was following a few people like Felicia Day and some of the big streamers that I've like found out through like Geek and Sundry and different networks like that. But I had never thought about streaming until more recently when I got connected to Justin Moore and encouraged me to give it a try if I liked gaming and I wanted to maybe share that. And then it wasn't until later that I realized, oh, I could definitely do the whole streaming thing, playing video games, but it could be more than that for me. It could be a chance for me to like analyze video games in a more like narrative context, and then also to share like creative sides of me. Like I'd only followed gamers when I was a user, so I didn't realize that there were creatives on the platform streaming like sewing, knitting, like every manner of things you do with your hands. And I thought that was fantastic. And I was like, you know what? I'm a writer, but I don't know how I'm going to share writing with the stream, but I'll come up with it. So I've had a couple different formats, but I'm most comfortable with the more recent layout. But yeah, I do short editing sessions. And that seems to work best for sharing it with other writers who come into my chat.
Yeah. How was that first experience when you kind of took that step to be like, you know what, I don't have to do games? And how was that first writing stream?
Okay, so the first layout was like, it was really terrible. I'm not gonna lie. So what I did was, you know how everyone has like most people have a just starting screen or starting soon screen where it'll be like a 10-minute countdown.
Yeah.
I was like, well, nobody's gonna want to sit and actually watch me like hyper focused on a bit of writing for however long I want to write. Let's say it's an hour. So maybe I shouldn't make that part of like the main stream where I'm like live on camera, supposed to be interacting with chat. And so what I did was I did an hour-long starting screen.
Oh.
And so it said stream starting soon, which would be gaming, right? But then off to the side, like half of the window was my document that I was writing on. And so while my mic was muted, people could watch what I was doing if they wanted to kind of backseat it. If I wasn't asking for input or anything, but if anybody was curious to see how many times I delete the same sentence over and over, there they go. So that's what I did. It didn't work. It wasn't engaging. Like for me, I would rather just do it off stream. And so I was like, how do I make this accessible? And like the two things I learned was I need to make it more brief. I can't do a full like 3-hour stream and have it all be writing. It would be different if I was given like pieces of writing to analyze and like not my own writing necessarily, but maybe to workshop someone else's writings. If someone wanted to submit, for critique, obviously I wouldn't say that I'm professionally paid to do this, but it's something I've been working at for a long time. So I feel like it would be something that would be interesting to watch me like pick apart someone's writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then eventually it's just kind of evolved to be, nope, it's going to be half an hour stints, maybe a little bit longer if I'm feeling it. And it's going to be very interactive with chat. I'm going to read aloud what I'm saying. I'm going to talk about why I hate the sentence I'm working on or what I'm trying to do with it. I will like point blank ask chat, hey, what do you think about this word? Too flowery? Do we want something more simple? Is there another way to describe this? And then chat's a little more engaged with that. And that's been working out better. But I also don't stream writing every time I stream now. I only do it once or twice a week if I do it.
Yeah, I don't do writing in that same aspect, but I tried to get a little bit into songwriting. And my gateway into that was taking K-pop songs and trying to do English versions of them.
Yes.
I love that.
Needless to say, I definitely relate with that, doing that same line over and over again, being like, I hate it, but I don't know how to fix it. And then just having to let go of it for a second and be like, you know what? I need to just continue writing other stuff because if I don't, I'm just going to be stuck here for an hour on stream, and that's not the most entertaining thing in the world. But I can totally feel that of like, people are on Twitch, they don't care about this. You know what I mean? Like feeling that like, oh, this is not entertaining enough. This is not flashy enough. This is not, so I definitely feel that. And I don't do that as much, especially now because of the MCAs. I'm definitely not going to play like K-pop instrumentals in the background. Yeah, I'm definitely still need to figure out how I'm going to do those. Certainly probably original stuff down the line, which is even more nerve-wracking because turns out when it's completely original material, then it's like you feel like every single person watching is judging, even though they're usually lovely and they usually don't have like terrible things to say. And usually the ones that do end up getting bopped in the head. So it's fine.
You just end up whatever insecurities you have in your head, you just project that out onto your audience. You're like, they're all thinking this way about me.
Yeah. It's hard.
Even when I would sing, I would be like, obviously no one is perfect when they sing, and certainly even the best singers in the world screw up, but every time I would do it, I would be like, oh, I'm a fraud. I would think I'm a fraud. I'm the worst. I shouldn't do this ever again. So it's definitely very nerve-wracking. But as far as like your content when you're like analyzing stories and stuff like that, have you found that your community tends to do the same as well? As far as like adapting to the way that you do your commentary, other than like in comparison to like other streamers who probably focus on like, oh, this gameplay is really fun or this character is really cute and stuff like that. So have you found that your community has kind of adapted easily, or how do you think that has been as like a journey for people who come into your spaces for the first time and they're probably expecting different type of commentary, but then they're like, ooh, this is different. We're doing something cool here. Not that, being loud and annoying like me isn't also good, but, it's different. So, yeah, how do you find that, Kara?
I actually find my community at this point is filled with people who are very much into that. They're very much into kind of the behind the scenes of why games end up the way that they do. Because a lot of the times it's not because the people lack the skill to make the game everything that like we'd want the game to be. A lot of the times it has to do with budget or the way that the production schedule went, and sometimes those are things that you can see. If you're another game developer, you're like, I know what happened here. This has happened to me.
Yeah.
And so my audience, there's a lot of people who are very interested in having that kind of behind the scenes take and understanding how to critique games better for themselves. Like maybe they know that a certain moment in a game hit them weird, but they really don't understand why. And being able to explain like, this is why you love this game. People are very receptive to that.
Nice. What about you, Andy? As far as like your commentary on the narrative of a game and the writing of a game, have you found that your community has been welcoming to that, or are they like, oh my god, stop being so critical, let me just enjoy my game?
No. Well, first of all, no one's allowed to talk to me like that in my stream. Yeah. No. I welcome all opinions that are backed with reasons and not just like, I hate that. It's like, okay, why do you hate it though? Like, is it because of the writing? Is it because you didn't connect with the character? Is it because you felt like some area of the game misrepresented some area of life that the game is supposed to be representing, I think most of the community members want to talk about those issues. I feel like it's 50-50. I feel like some of them care. Most people, it's one way or the other. My more active chat members will definitely be the ones who want to have that discussion and carry it on. But there's a lot of passive viewers who are just like, okay, yeah, I'm here to watch you play Last of Us, kill zombies, whatever. I'm like, okay, but I want to talk about like why this trans character was developed poorly and
oh yeah, that's certainly plenty of those games, aren't there?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
But I mean, my whole playthrough of a game is not constant commentary. I think Kara does a much better job at at really analyzing as she plays the story. I will play a chunk and then I'll be like, it'll be like a recap. I'll be like, okay, now let's take a break and like talk about why I didn't like that thing that happened an hour ago. because I have ADHD, and so my brain is like here, and then it's here, and then it's here, and then it remembers to go back to here. So
yeah. It's interesting how like those more active viewers that you were mentioning usually are the ones that we end up kind of just randomly attract. Not, I guess not randomly, but it's the energy that we kind of put out there are those that end up like being more active, and the ones that end up being more over to our communities. I actually have a little bit of a spicy question, if you will, that I don't want y'all to get in trouble. However, is there a game, however, I'm going to be messy and ask the question anyway. Is there a game that may be, you know, revered, if you will, by peers of ours in the gaming industry that you, from your perspective as writers, right, that you've looked at the game and you've been like, no, I don't think it's as good as y'all are saying it is. Kara, I see your reaction. I see a visual reaction, and I'm very curious to hear.
I want to hear Kara's reaction.
Well, I think I've been railing on this game for a little while now in my streams, but Ruby, you were recently playing Final Fantasy VII R.
I knew it.
Yeah, it's that one. That's one.
I became a patron of Kara's Patreon just so I could hear her rant about it.
I did on my Patreon. I put an hour-long video out. So here. Let me casually explain just real quick. No spoilers, but a lot of people think that it's because of the ending. It's not because of the ending. And the game is not necessarily poorly written. Like, the dialogue is exceptionally great in that game. The characterization is really great. It's the structure of how they handle the narrative and how they integrate the gameplay with the narrative that is a mess. That is kind of a mess.
Yeah, I saw a tidbit of you talking about that first mission, which we can talk about because it's the first like hour of the game. And I'm not gonna lie, I both felt personally attacked, but also I was like, valid, you know, like very valid. Because it's like, listen, you can't start the game and like make a whole ordeal about this mission, and then it's like everything that you did for that entire portion of the game kind of wasn't up to you. At the same time, like I get it that they were, you know, that the idea was like for them to portray them as worse than they were. Like, oh, we made the explosion bigger than they could have made it. But also at the same time, does it matter? Because at the same time, that was their intent to begin with. So it's like, you know, it was interesting for sure. Yeah. But other than that, I did consider hovering over the end stream button. I did for a split second. I did consider that.
I promise that my reasonings are very good. That moment in the bombing mission ties into a broader story point about just negating the player's actions through the story in a lot of cases. So
Interesting.
I'm like,
okay.
Again, trying not to spoil.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna plug for Kara. Y'all should go subscribe to their Patreon.
Yeah.
Even the lowest tier will get you the full analysis of, it's like an hour long, the breakdown of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
It is.
But Kara does a wonderful job of breaking things down in like talking about dialogue, then talking about narrative, then talking about pacing, then, you know, like that to me was really well thought out. So I do give you props for that, even though I disagree with some of the points. But
That's fair.
No. My main point of disagreement, and I can talk about it because it's not a spoiler, is I understand your gripe with all of the various like fetch quests involved with the various sectors of the slums.
Okay.
And how menial they seem in the greater scheme of the story that we know is being developed. However, I will say that the tone of the game was meant more or less to portray what it's like to live in Midgar and to be under that oppressive rule of Shinra Electric Company. And so I feel like the game succeeded in creating an atmosphere and letting you feel like you're one of the members that live in the slums. Like an everyday citizen, not the upper echelon of Midgardians. So for me, I think the game did an incredibly job creating scope and scale. But in terms of the narrative of Final Fantasy VII as we know it from the original game, it is not a good standalone game. I will say that. Really because I'm only thinking about this in context of the next two games. I'm like, they better be good. They better be good because this is like one portion of the pie and it was a good slice. But like, I want to consider these games as like a full story, even though the Square Enix has said like, no, we designed this to be a standalone game. I'm like, no, you didn't. This is part one.
You really didn't.
Yeah, like, and in the end, like I'm going to play through all of them back to back, however many there will be, and then I will decide if I like the story they developed. But as a standalone game, was it entertaining? Yeah, it was really entertaining. Was the pacing terrible? It's a little breakneck at points, and then a little slow at others. But did it make me appreciate the size and like, what's the word I'm looking for? The scale of Midgar, and like now I'm finally connecting to all these little NPCs walking around selling me items. Like I feel like they really did a good job creating the culture of Midgar, like what the average person what their lives are like. Like I want to go grab a drink at Seventh Heaven, and
I want to respond because I actually agree with you on that. I think they do a really great job of like designing the world of Midgar and showing you people's lives, but I don't think that has that much to do with the side quests. I think that has more to do with the environmental design and with people talking as you walk by, and like you really get, if you choose to, you really get to immerse yourself in that. I still think the side quests could have been more interesting.
Yeah, that's fair. I just like, they definitely made a longer game than they needed to. It could have been about 10 hours shorter, and it would have been even better, I think.
Agreed.
I will say though, best like new experience in the game was listening to the little DJ tracks that you collect along the way of like famous themes from Final Fantasy games. I was like, this is amazing. Like, the remixes, they sound like, that was great. I love that. I was like, where's this SoundCloud? I want to Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Listen, did I play the game fully? Not yet, so I'm not going to comment too much on it. But I do agree with the sentiment of like, you do get a gist of like what it's like to be a citizen of any given slum that you're exploring. You get an idea of like what their day-to-day is like, and you can kind of even see that in the way that the characters interact with you, and like how everybody kind of deals with the oppression and being in the slums versus being, in the above areas, and how the privilege scales is different and stuff like that. So, but I'm not going to comment too much on it. My favorite line so far of that game is so silly when they're doing a mission, and it's Wedge, it's Cloud, it's Biggs, and Jesse. And Wedge, I think, falls or something happens, and Cloud takes him home, and he says, "Sorry for your ass." That, to me, that made me cackle so much. I just never expected Cloud to say that ever in my life. And to me, that was the funniest thing. I was like, listen, 2021 mood after the vaccines, hopefully some of us are going to hear that. That's all.
I absolutely need them to give their dialogue writer a bonus. I need them to do it.
The dialogue writing was really good. That was definitely one of my favorite things.
Top tier.
Yeah, for sure. Especially the way that they've portrayed Cloud in comparison to how he gets portrayed in like spin-offs and other games and stuff like that, and how they just kind of portrayed him as like a little bit of a grumpy cat in the remake, and I like that because that's him in a nutshell. Like he's fluffy, but also he just has like a tougher exterior.
I've never liked Cloud. Hot take. I don't know if that's a hot take. I've always thought he was really, and it's not. And I don't think the remake did a better job with that either. I think that Cloud was better in the original, maybe, because there were times where like Cloud's reactions were very like unrealistic to like what was being. There was one time where they criticized something Cloud did. Or no. I think you made a point of it in your in your breakdown, Kara. But there was one moment in Sector 5, right? I think Aerith's sector, where Cloud just got done doing some mercenary side quests, run-of-the-mill stuff. And this guy was supposed to thank him, or was grateful, was like, oh, thank you for doing that. And he was just like, yeah, you're welcome. And I was like, what? Like, where did that come? Why would you just be rude, like, out the gate?
The old man?
I don't remember. I just remember it was like, it was a sweet moment. Everybody was being like, oh, yeah, like, thank you for doing that. That was really great. Like, you did a great job. And Cloud's like, yeah, I guess. And I was like, you wouldn't say that. You probably wouldn't say anything. You'd probably just like nod or go like red faced because you're embarrassed. You don't like having like all this praise. I don't know. There were a few reactions where I felt like Cloud either overreacted or underreacted, and it wasn't necessarily him being broody. It was just like the voice actor maybe read the line wrong.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I mean, he is a person who's like, he likes to push people away. So when people start to get really grateful towards him, he's like, no, like, I hate you and everything you stand for.
Yeah. I think that Tifa and Aerith, though, let me say, that I was all about whenever they did something together or they teamed up and like ganged up on Cloud. I was like, okay.
I'm so excited to get there.
Yeah.
I love him so much.
The best thing in that game, to be honest.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I will say, this is suddenly a Final Fantasy VII Remake podcast, but it's fine. I will say that, like, my first impressions of Aerith, right at the like, as you get to know her a little bit, she's kind of rivaling Jessie as far as, like, being a little pushy. Like I feel like she tried I don't know, at the beginning when she first interacts with Cloud, I feel like she can see that there's more to him than the exterior, but I feel like she's like way more flirty than I remember her being. And also just like, but I guess that's kind of her as well. Like she's like cheeky and she's fun and she isn't that serious as I feel like I would always want to remember her as. But I really love her and Tifa, so I can't really criticize them a little bit. But I remember like there was this one part where he kind of acts as a bodyguard and takes her home and all that stuff. And I remember her saying some stuff and I was like, you're really going in, girl. You're really like, I get it, I relate, but also like, damn, I couldn't be that like forward. But we had a question.
She's pretty forward, yeah.
We have a question from Tony. And by the way, anyone watching this live on Twitch, you can ask us questions, and I'll try my best to get to your questions. It can be about anything, as long as boundaries. Don't be gross. Don't be weird. But the question, and I can't really scroll too far up, but it's basically if you could get a remake. If you could get any game remade, what would it be?
Final Fantasy VIII.
Yes.
because Final Fantasy VIII is absolutely a mess, but it's a mess because they ran out of production time, and like you can see the gems shining through, and I just want to know what it would have been like if they had had the time that they needed.
I didn't know that game was rushed. I just remember being blown away by the cinematics that my PlayStation 1 was cranking out. I was like, after having played FF7 like a couple years before it, I was like, is this the same generation console? Like, how did games progress so much over the course of a couple years? This is stunning.
Right? I
will
agree.
say Final Fantasy VIII's ending is probably one of my favorite endings of all the Final Fantasies. I think the sequence is absolutely beautiful. It makes no
Oh,
sense, but it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Just like the
Absolutely.
fragments of memories and just, I just love it. And I also really like, I think Cloud is a better, or sorry, Squall is a better broody, hot topic main character than Cloud is. But I really love Renoa's character.
Yeah, I do feel as though, unfortunately, that game gets a little bit of a bad rep because it is messy as far as like the gameplay, which is why it's a perfect candidate for a remake. Just, make it better gameplay. The story is there, you can improve upon it. Definitely don't recycle cutscenes and just randomly put weird 90s effects over them to make it seem like something else is happening at the end. But other than that, I was going to say I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm just going to say that's what I want. It will happen one day. And
We
that's,
can manifest it.
yeah, exactly. We can manifest it. We can surely manifest that. I would say for me, because we already have that opinion of Final Fantasy VIII, I would love. I've said this on my Just Gaming Things podcast, but I would love for either a remake or a reboot of like Sonic Adventure. I think that game deserves better. I think if they did a game that you could play as like the people's favorite Sonic characters with a decent storyline and unique perspectives on everybody, I think it could be really cool because that game actually did something that was very interesting. It's like every character that you played as, it's kind of like an alternate universe because in Sonic's perspective, he's the one who did the thing and he beat the guy. But in Tails' perspective, he's the one who did it. And then you know what I mean? Like every character, it's kind of almost like an alternative universe in which they're the main character and they did that. So I don't know if I would want that necessarily. Maybe I would want something that's more like the storylines kind of are all in the same universe and everybody just kind of correlates in the same timeline. But I would love that. Instead of Big the Cat, put Shadow the Hedgehog in there. Give me more Amy. Amy deserves better.
Amy deserves better.
Yeah, she needs like a love interest that isn't gonna run away from her. Which goes into my theory that Sonic is gay for Tails, but that's another story.
Ooh.
I did a PowerPoint presentation on that.
No, you did not.
Send me the slides.
I shout out to Tater Thoughts. I was a participant in his PowerPoint presentation competition. I won funniest concept for season 2. And so I'll share the slides with y'all. Do we have any other remakes that we would like to see?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Andy?
Final Fantasy VI.
Ooh.
Final Fantasy VI has never had. I mean, they had like their. I don't know what console it came out for. They did a remake of sorts or a remaster, and it wasn't.
Oh yeah.
I would like an FF7 remake of 6. I think that would be incredible to see voice acting, beautiful cinematics. I think that story is really beautiful as well. Kefka, probably one of the best villains in all of Final Fantasy. But a lot of the newer generation of Final Fantasy lovers haven't played the former games, prior to 7. And so it'd be really nice to see a reboot of that. Or if there's a way, I don't know how they would do it. I just want to see something revolutionary, but I would love Tactics to get a remake.
Ooh.
Oh,
think-
I would play the heck out of that.
I think Tactics had one of the best stories couched under a turn-based tactical RPG. So I don't know if they could do like I would love to see these battlefields like fleshed out.
Yeah.
And like you can move around them more like you can move around a regular dungeon in Final Fantasy like 7, for instance, like any of those levels, but with like certain limitations so that it could still be strategy. But I don't know, but I would just love to see that story brought to life because the actual narrative of Final Fantasy Tactics is very rich, and a lot of people don't know that.
I actually have a vision for that. I could imagine it as like Valkyria Chronicles, in which there is an amount of steps that your characters can take, but you don't really see like the little blocks on the screen. So they just give you like a radius for how long a certain character can walk. And they have things like blocking, like where you can crouch, things that you can hide, different character classes. So I can easily see something like Valkyria Chronicles, or something like even Fire Emblem, like what they did with Three Houses, for example, where you can kind of like, it's still like you can still see like the blocks in which like you can walk 6 blocks, but you cannot, if you zoom in a lot, you can actually play it as if it's like a third person perspective. But I think that would be cool. Square Enix,
imagine
listen.
all the job classes and all the different armors.
Right?
Oh my god, it would be so
Can we have
cool.
Final Fantasy X-2 transformation sequences?
Oh,
Please.
oh, that would be cool.
Please. Oh my god. I would be 100% here for that.
Do we think that 10 would probably be the next likely candidate for remake within the next 10 years?
After 7, I can see them going for 10 or 9, to be honest, because I think they're.
I hope that they go for 9.
Yeah.
Car, are you enjoying 9? What do you think so far?
I love 9. 9 is one of my favorite Final Fantasies.
Yeah, I love it so much.
I just think that like if they're gonna go for the remake, 10 is not gonna be a big leap when you remake it, but 9's gonna be a huge leap.
Yeah.
True.
I'm almost.
The music for 9 is really good too.
I'm almost like tempted to ask for them to start from like Final Fantasy 1. You know what I mean? Like Final Fantasy, like a full-on reboot. Almost not of the series necessarily, because we don't need to change anything past 6 onward. Well, some of them past 6 we could probably change a little bit, you know. But I would love it. Like, imagine the creativity that they would be able to bring to the table with 1, because there's like, it's so bare bones, the original, as far as like characters, character models, and like the exploration that we could bring to the table. I feel like if they started from 1 and they made it like a game that they could like reintroduce the series to people, I think that would be really cool, because then people would play a remake to 1 and they would be like, oh, I'm curious to play 2 and 3 and 4 and onwards. So I think that could be really cool. Are they gonna do it? I doubt it. But you know, we don't even have a port of 1 and 2 for like Steam or anything.
I know.
So I don't think they have any interest in that, in like those first Final Fantasies.
I know. I think they just want to push forward. I think they're going to experiment with 7's remake, see how it goes. Hopefully the level of professionalism that has gone into the first installment of the remake will continue for the next couple. And then we can look forward to 16 now. 16 looks really promising, I think.
Yeah. I'm kind of afraid because the trailer looked very Final Fantasy 14, and I was like, I hope that this looks like a next-gen game when it comes out. Not that Final Fantasy 14 looks ugly, but I'm just like, you know, when you hear like next-gen, you expect for it to look around the same quality as 7 Remake, or potentially better, because that's technically PS4 and PS. So I don't know how they can do it, but they have the consoles to try to do it in. They have the technology to try to do that. I'm just scared.
Storytellers, though, the 14 storytellers are really, really good. A lot of people don't know the 14 plotline because they see the MMO skin and they're like, not really for me. That's not my aesthetic. But like couched within the MMO is a really fascinating, wonderful, beautiful, expansive story that's constantly evolving. So I have faith in the team to bring out a really good story at the very least.
For sure.
Although, caveat, you do kind of need to get through the whole first chunk of the story. So like, if you've played Final Fantasy 14, you're like, it's not that good. Just no, you need to get to the expansion.
Yeah. That's what I've heard. You have to power through the base game, and then the good stuff is over there. And I was like, okay.
Did y'all check out Square Enix's site though for FF16, where they go into a little bit of the lore behind the game?
I really haven't.
They have a website up, and it tells you a little bit about the basic world. So you have the flavor of the different kingdoms. I don't know. It looks good.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's crystals involved because Square Enix is obsessed with crystals and magic. But it's still like, I think that they did it in a different way that seems more fresh, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
I like that they're going back to the crystal, like being the center of the story, because that was such a old school Final Fantasy thing. That was what they went with for like basically the first 6 games. So I love that they're kind of going back in a way and almost doing a retrospective. I'm kind of concerned for the cast, because so far I've only seen men, and 15 was nice. But I would like for the cast to be a little diverse. I want to, I don't want to play as like white twinks again. I don't need an entire cast. It was cute for one game, but don't do it again.
Don't you? Yeah.
My hope is that, because like Final Fantasy 16 so far seems like it's more of a return to the fantasy, whereas like a lot of Final Fantasy games recently have been really sci-fi influenced, because they've been headed by Nomura. And so I'm hopeful that maybe we'll get like different races back in the party again, like in Final Fantasy 9, where basically there was like 2 humans, I think, and everybody else was a different race. I'm hoping that we'll go back to something like that.
Yes.
Freya, Phoenicians, and what else? Oh, Vivi. I don't remember what their race was called.
Vivi.
The quintessential like black mage character design.
I know.
Love it.
And also like from 12, Fran, an icon, a legend.
Yeah.
The first Vera.
Absolute icon.
I love her so much. I always switch to her every time I get the chance to. But yeah. Since we've spent basically the first half of this podcast talking about Final Fantasy, listen, we're dropping hints that we're Final Fantasy queers, and it's fine. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about content, because another way in which we got together, this is a mini Rainbow Arcade Summit panel situation, because the 3 of us were a part of the Etiquette in LGBTQIA2+ spaces. And I remember at the time, we were like, this is great, let's talk about it. And then 1 hour zooms through and we're like, oh, great, we still have plenty to talk about.
No.
So I figured I would bring a little bit of that to today's conversation, because it's something that we kind of bonded over at the time, So I figured it would be a great thing for us to kind of talk about some of our gripes with streaming, because as much as making content in a public way, like live streaming and YouTube and all that stuff, as much as that's fun, there's also some things that we could express to make our experience better. So I kind of wanted to start from like the beginning of someone's experience on a stream. So saying hi, and how that can kind of, you would think saying hi wouldn't be complicated, but turns out that can go wrong very quickly if your first impression of someone is them sexualizing you, for example. Like a thing that happens to me quite regularly is just people fully being like, nice lips, bro. I'm like, no. What do those lips do? As I like am using my chapstick on them, I'm like, they do a lot of things, like telling you to get the fuck out of here. That's one wonderful thing that they do. But yeah, what are some things that you would think would be common sense as far as someone coming into your space, whether it's on social media, whether it's on your stream, and that should be common sense, and unfortunately it is not. What do you think, Andy?
Leading with, are you single?
That's
Like what the
that doesn't
what the
help.
hell? Where do you I think female presenting casters get this more than males, but it's like, ooh, like I posted a TikTok. I actually deleted it because I was like, but this person was like, I'd like to date you. And I was like,
Damn.
I'm a stranger on the internet, sir. No. Like, maybe don't lead with that. And they were like, well, I'd still like to get to know you. I'm like, this is TikTok. This is not a dating app. Same thing goes for my stream because I've been, a lot of traffic has been driven from other platforms into my community. So these people are coming from spaces that don't have any etiquette, like YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. And they come into my Twitch thinking it's cool to like objectify me like that. And I'm like, no, we're not going to start with that question. So I've been calling it out as soon as it happens. I try to be nice at first. I'm like, hey, I'm happy you found my channel through TikTok. I'm glad it's doing its job. But like, just know that some streamers are probably going to ban you without even educating you on how there's something problematic in the way that you just greeted me.
I'm the streamer.
I'm gonna yeah, I'm like, no, like, don't do that. I was like, I'll let you know that I'm okay with letting you know that I am single, but also just know that that's a deeply personal question that has nothing to do with my stream and the content that I'm providing right now. So please don't ask me or anybody else that kind of question again. Also, hi, nice to meet you.
Right. Exactly.
It's very relatable. It's just like, hey, stop doing that. That's not gonna fly here. I was like, hi, welcome. Glad to have you. Like,
yeah.
Or like banning someone for being inappropriate and then they follow and you're like, oh my God, thank you so much for following. You can't chat, but thank you so much. Thank you so much for raising my numbers. Certainly that's a thing that happened today, hours ago. But there is also something to be said about compliments and how people sometimes don't understand how much of a slippery slope they are. Because there is a difference, and I don't think people understand this. So I'm verbalizing it. There is a difference between saying, you look cute today. I love what you're wearing today. Did you do something different to your brows this day? Oh, I love your makeup. Oh, wow, that lipstick color is really cute. I love the game that you're playing. Imagine that, commenting on my content. You're really funny. You're really entertaining. Those are compliments. Coming into a stream and like just fully being like, nice ass. Or like something that is just
Where?
like,
I know
see it?
it's not I
they do that though. People do that.
that didn't come from my own experiences, I will say. Yeah, anyway, but yeah, what would you say, Cara, for anyone watching from your own perspective, what's your take on compliments, specifically on appearance?
So for compliments on appearance, honestly, I would not say anything until you see something else happen in the chat that implies that the streamer is okay with you commenting on their appearance. Because there's some streamers that like just do not want people to comment on their appearance at all, and it makes them feel very insecure, or it maybe triggers some issues that they have. So I would just in general, coming into a stream neutral, like give yourself that like either neutral, like, hi, how's it going? Or don't say anything and give yourself that time to observe and like gauge the mood in the chat and learn about what maybe the streamer might be okay with. I'm okay with compliments on my appearance, but only non-sexualized compliments like you look pretty, you look cute, I love your shirt, stuff like that. Not comments about there's lots of sexually inappropriate comments
right.
I can think of and none that I want to repeat here. So nothing like that. And also, obviously, what people can think is pretty can be different in some cultures. So like, while in some cultures, having a big forehead is desirable. You don't always want to go in and be like, wow, I love your giant forehead, because that's not going to be like receptive. Like, not everybody's going to like that.
No.
Oh, not the forehead. I'm like looking at my preview like, oh, there's my forehead. There's plenty of real estate on there.
I love your
I've got-
hair. Yeah, thanks.
So Germans like to come into my stream and insult me in German, not knowing that I speak German.
Oh, that's
And I
interesting.
just want, there's
That's
just
a
like
cute misstep.
it's a group of German trolls who go around telling people that their noses look like horse noses, and they just repeat that to everybody. I've seen them in other people's streams. That's just what they do. So
I mean, I guess it's better than homophobia, but
it's definitely very strange. If you ever get a stranger randomly saying German in your stream, I'm like 50% chance that that's what's going on.
yeah.
It's so specific. I agree. We did have a comment that kind of highlighted how saying nice shirt can very easily turn into, can you take it off? And I hate that. I also very much dislike that. So
You're gonna get banned so fast.
right. First of all, it's winter here. How dare you? How rude. But we got into a little bit of the first introduction. And by the way, usually first impressions are everything. So there's a very high likelihood of like, if you fucked up your introduction, I will either ban you or I will like, you'll be on thin ice right off the bat. So there's very little leeway with what you can get away with after that. And my mods are on it. So just be aware. But let's say people have become acquainted with you and your community, and sometimes there's that moment when a regular decides to act like a troll or a newcomer, and or someone who's like, wait a minute, if you acted like this when you first came into the stream, I would have never welcomed you, and so why? To me, it's when after like a couple streams, people get like overly familiar with me. And in the queer community, that usually means insulting people and trying to pass it off as a joke and just be like, oh, I was trying to read you. I was just, just having fun. It was just the playful shade. I'm like, no, absolutely not. So have you had moments like that where like a regular kind of turns and real in a way that is like usually surprising? Because if you're like, oh, that's a regular, I didn't expect them to act out of pocket. For me, it was commenting on my gut one time. I was like standing up, feeling very insecure about that already, and someone was like, oh, she's a thick queen. I was like, excuse me. They said butch queen, which I was like, okay, that's not what that means, but I know what you're trying to say. So there's that. But yeah, have y'all had a regular turn in such a way, and what advice would you give to avoid situations like that from happening? Andy's thinking.
I have had this happen with a few, and some that I've had to just like completely ban because it was just like out of nowhere a very sudden and intense reaction that was just like, well, like, I'm asking you not to do this, and the mod is asking you not to do this, and you're fighting with the mod. So like now we're at a point where this is happening, and it's always really sad. Like I'm never happy. I'm always like, why? Like what? Like I know that this isn't you because you've been a regular in the stream. So why is this suddenly happening? And like it makes me very, very sad. So I mean, I guess for the times that those have happened in my stream, it's usually been somebody gets really upset about a seemingly innocuous thing. Like maybe I'm playing a game that they really hate, so they just come in to bash on the game the whole time, or I ask them not to share a spoiler or not to backseat, and they take it very personally, even though they know that that's a rule in my stream. I would say that if you're a viewer and you ever end up doing something like that, and especially if you know that you're in a moment where you're heated or you've messed up, just immediately just, I'm sorry, I overstepped, like, this is your space, these are your boundaries, I'm sorry I overstepped the line. But as a streamer, for how to handle it better, I honestly have no real idea, aside from the fact that rules apply evenly to everybody.
No, that's a really good one, because sometimes regulars, especially if money gets thrown into the equation, sometimes people feel as though subscribing to you or supporting you monetarily is some sort of free pass to kind of bypass the rules, even temporarily. So that is such a good advice. I wish I did that from day one, of like, the rules apply to everyone evenly. Like, just because you're a regular doesn't mean that I need to give you 1,000 chances, because if someone came in like that, I wouldn't give them that many chances. So yeah, applying the rules to everyone can be a little difficult sometimes, because you feel as though like you're betraying someone who, like, oh, they supported me. If I call them out, I'm betraying them. But it's like, no, you're curating a space for yourself and for other people. And the thing about it sometimes is that sometimes you feel guilty because sometimes nobody says a thing about it, but people will remember. People may be quiet, but they will appreciate the steps that you take towards curating a better community. Because people are not going to come out of the woodwork to be like, hey, streamer, how about you fix this? Like, they don't want to put you in a weird position and pitting you against other viewers, but they will appreciate when you get rid of the bad seeds, I promise. What about you, Andy?
It's something that I'm still learning how to do. Like, setting boundaries, I feel, is something that Kara and even you, Ruby, are really good at doing. And for me, I think when I first started streaming, not that long ago, really, but I was more, I didn't want to step on anybody in chat's toes, because I was like, I want to like build a community. I want to attract people to me. But I think that also gave some people a license to be too familiar with me. And so I have some regulars that I know their intentions, so it's okay, but I also don't want them setting a bad example for newcomers. And so while I may have some regulars who've been with me from the get-go that are a little flirty with me, I've been calling it out a little bit more, because I'm like, I don't want new people coming in here thinking it's okay to start flirting with me, because it's not. I'm not single, so I can be hit on by you in my stream. Like, and then ultimately, it's my stream, my comfortability while I'm live in front of you. This is a production. There's a lot of work and anxiety that goes on behind the scenes. I enjoy it, but ultimately there's still like, I'm worrying about technology failing on me. I'm worried about making smooth transitions. I'm worried about curating an enjoyable experience. All of that is happening while I'm still trying to entertain and be a host. And so if I start worrying about how someone's projecting feelings onto me, or it is bringing negative energy into chat, it can be very hard for me to continue streaming at a 100% level. So like, one negative comment that comes in offhanded, even from a friend, can be like something that brings my stream from here to here in terms of like my energy and my like will to continue streaming. It's interesting. I'd actually love to pose a question to both of you. Have you ever looked at your unban requests?
Oh, I did one time, and then I turned off that feature. Yeah, it's not cute. It's not.
I don't think that I have anything in. When I looked, I didn't have anything in there. I'm not sure if my mods like went through and bopped it all before I got there. But yeah, I don't see. I honestly haven't had to ban that many people who like are actually members of my community, and I think that's more just because, like, as long as you let people know the rules, they're going to be receptive to them, unless they're a troll. So it's really just like, are you an actual viewer or are you not an actual viewer? And that's like the majority of of like being a streamer on Twitch is like, which group do you fall into? Let's spin the wheel.
Yeah. But there's like a difference between like setting boundaries subtly, like hinting at it, hoping that the social cue like comes through the screen, and then like flat out saying, don't do that, right? Like if you're in Glenn on Hell's stream, Glenn will be like, yeah, we're not talking about that today. Ruby, you do that too. You're like, yeah, no, that's not a subject we talk about here. You know, and I don't do that. I'm not as like blunt about that, although I would like to think of myself as very straightforward. There have been times where someone comes in that I try to like subtly educate them and like guide them in a direction that's like, yeah, like maybe let's talk about something else, or that's interesting, next conversation. And it's not even that they brought up something that was illegal per my chat rules or something. It was more like, you're talking to yourself right now, you're monologuing, like,
yeah,
and you're continuing to monologue about a subject that nobody's interacting with you, and the streamer is clearly not interested in interacting on this point. And it's kind of, I feel like I've communicated that I'm like in subtlety being like, yeah, that's interesting, but you know, maybe like we're all trying to just kind of relax. That's a little bit deep for right now. I'll say something like that, and I feel like the other day I had that happen. Someone was monologuing about a narrative idea, more like a philosophical idea, regarding like robots and humans ascending beyond our physical form into like cybernetic beings. And I was like, this is a really interesting thought, but like also it's Friday, it's like we're trying to unwind, 2020 is almost over, and like I don't want to, like, I am writing right now, I'm writing fantasy, and I was like, while I think that this thought exercise is interesting, I'm also not wanting to talk about it right now. It has nothing to do with what I'm writing or what chat's talking about. And this person persisted to like randomly spout out like blocks of text about this idea, like a running conversation, but it was with themselves. They weren't talking with anybody. Nobody else was commenting. And I had commented like 3 different times. I was like, yeah, that's interesting, but like, what does that have to do with the fantasy story that I'm writing right now, or like specifically what chat's talking about? Maybe let's, steer it back to that. And then eventually I ended up banning them, and I got an unban request from them. And I went through and I reviewed the VOD, because I was like, maybe I wasn't clear enough that I didn't want to talk about that subject, that it was getting awkward. And it was a shame, because I went back through the entire, and this took a lot of energy for me to even research, but I went back through the entire VOD, and they came in not hot and heavy with these ideas. They came in very much like, hey, I'm a writer too. Like, I really love what you're doing here. And they were like saying hi to other people that were coming into chat. And so they were engaging the way that I like them to engage, but the conversation then turned into this very weird, very metaphysical, like very deep and heavy for the chat. And I was like, these are all things I would be interested in talking about if I had designed this specific stream to talk about these specific themes. But it's not. It's a light editing stream talking about life and then writing craft, not ideas, philosophical ideas. And so I remember telling them like 3 times. And then when I went through the VOD, I was like, maybe I wasn't clear enough. Maybe they didn't pick up on the subtlety of me being like, I'm not really interested in talking about that. Because I didn't flat out say, I don't want to talk about that. But at one point I did say, what does that have to do with anything? I was like, I feel like that was a pretty like obvious hint that I didn't want to talk about it. But yeah, they didn't stop, and I ended up banning them. But then I looked at the unban request, and they wrote a very thoughtful unban request. They were like, why did you ban me? Like, I understand why you did it, but like, why? And I was like, and I talked with my mods, and I was like, what do you guys think? And they were like, we can give them another chance. And so I wrote them a nice letter, and I was like, hey, here's the reasons why I banned you, but after further like reflection, I think maybe I jumped the gun, and maybe it's my fault for not communicating as clearly as I should the boundary of where you were going and how you were crossing it.
Yeah.
So that's why I gave them another chance. I haven't seen them back since, so it's like whatever. I gave them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And I also understand that so many people that come into our spaces may not have the ability to pick up on certain social cues that everyone else is readily able to pick up, whether it's by interacting with me personally more often, so they know how I react to things I'm not happy about or not keen on talking about. They can tell by my subtle facial expressions. They know me. Or maybe they don't actually have the ability to read that in other people, and it might be something a deeper issue, personal issue. And so I definitely didn't want to come down on someone that may have that inability.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that maybe I just need to be more clear in spelling it out. Like, hey, I don't want to talk about that. I appreciate the thought you put into that, but I don't want to talk about it. Thanks, though.
And go ahead, Cara.
That's definitely like there's a whole sliding scale of like level 0, like I'm just gonna ignore this person in chat because I don't want to talk about it, and hopefully they'll pick up on it, to all the way to like level 4 where you're like, hey, explicitly stop that, like, and I'm upset, please stop.
Yeah.
This is your last warning kind of sliding scale. And I think that's one thing. You raise a really very important point, Andy, that like there are people who either, it could be because they're international, it could be because they have autism, like there's a lot of different reasons why somebody might not be as able to pick up on social cues, and why the more subtle ways of setting boundaries can be overlooked by some people. And I sometimes when I'm in people's streams, I used to work with kids with autism, so like I'm like always thinking about that, where I'm like, I want to give people the benefit of the doubt a lot of times, and just like tell them explicitly, like, hey, like, just so you know, like, this isn't really a thing that we do here. It's a very, very interesting thought, but I'm just not for this space. And just give them a very specific line so that they know. And then if they keep going over it, for sure, I'm like, all right, haha, bye, you're out of here. But yeah, that's a really important point that I think doesn't always get talked about on Twitch, is that setting boundaries, first of all, is really hard, especially if you're not as comfortable with conflict, or not as comfortable with the idea of upsetting somebody who is your viewer. And there's also a huge power dynamic between streamers and the audience, where I'm always fearful of coming down too hard on people, because like I have all the power here. Like I can make the chat turn on somebody if I phrase things incorrectly, if like they feel like I'm being personally attacked, and I don't want that for someone. I want somebody to have to experience that. So it can be really hard to like thread the needle through and find the good ways to set boundaries without upsetting people or going too far.
It's the labor, sometimes physically, sometimes it feels like it's like physical, almost like pain of like stopping yourself from saying certain things. And some folks in my community already pick up on like, either because I'm very expressive whether I like it or not, so sometimes they can even tell like if I do a little eyebrow tilt or anything that to me I didn't even notice that I did. Like sometimes there's just like small little things that sometimes I do, and they're like, I know for a fact you were not feeling that. And I was like, maybe so, but also it worries me how like obvious it was to you, because I thought I was being slick, I thought I was keeping my cool. And apparently sometimes that's not a thing. But to kind of go to Andy's point of like sometimes cracking down on people, it's very mood related. Sometimes I'm in a mood where everything is wonderful in this world and I just want to expect the best out of everybody, and I just let things go a little to that line of like, okay, they're obviously crossing a line. But there's days where I'm like, no. Immediately I'm like, let's not do that. And I do that with regulars, I do that with newcomers. Like it just depends on the day. And sometimes for me, the thing that frustrates me sometimes is like when I go to a VOD, and I've started like editing older streams and turning them into YouTube content. I
gotta do that.
Sometimes it's so time consuming because I play a lot of long games. But it's frustrating to me when I see myself like lose it. Not in a way of like I get angry, but like going from like I'm in a good mood, I'm entertaining everybody, this is a wonderful space, and then seeing stuff happen in chat and like seeing myself get drained by it, and sometimes letting things go a little far, without doing anything about it, or sometimes even without, like Andy said, like without straight up saying like, no, let's not do this, let's not do that, because I would like to believe that sometimes that is kind of on me. Like I should have communicated that let's not talk about that. I would prefer not to say this. I would prefer not to get into that. I'm playing Final Fantasy VII. We're paying attention to that right now. This is not the time to talk about that random thing that you want to bring into the stream. But it's really, really hard to do. It's really hard to do because, like Kara said, it feels as though like one wrong move, everybody is jumping on them. and like one wrong move, you feel like you're destroying this person, right? Because like maybe for me, and I'm the type of person that lets things fester and then I explode, but it's not the person's fault, like that they didn't catch on that I was getting annoyed, right? So sometimes to me it's like trying to communicate that I'm like annoyed without being straight up saying that I'm annoyed. But it's really a lot. There's a lot of emotional labor that goes into it, because even sometimes even like smaller things or things that you would consider small, like someone being like you look handsome today, and me being like, I'm non-binary. Sometimes words like that are very gendered, especially masculine associated words like that, kind of rub me the wrong way. And it's that entire dialogue of the person being like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, and then feeling like I just completely called them a terrible person and a transphobe and all these things, and I'm like, no, it's fine, you're fine, don't worry, it's just that, you know, it becomes a whole ordeal on our end of like, no, you're good, like you're fine, making sure that they're fine. Meanwhile, you're like doing all of this work to make sure that you're fine, that your community is fine, and also this person that wronged you in either a small way or a bigger way, that they're also fine somehow. And that whole journey.
Yeah, getting them to move on.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
just apologize and move on. Like, thank the person, actually. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah.
Because at the moment you make it like, oh my god, I'm so terrible, I'm so sorry, then like it's now less about you crossing a boundary with the streamer, and now it's about you feeling bad.
Yeah.
And not the streamer who's been wronged.
Exactly. Unfortunately, time is zooming by today as well. Turns out time is a flat circle and it goes by very quickly. And do y'all have any other like etiquettes in queer spaces, little tidbits that you may have about that topic that maybe we haven't touched on either today or on our panel, which was very good, by the way. Rainbow Arcade's YouTube channel has all the panels up. I recommend watching that. But yeah, do y'all have any that you can kind of think of? Not to put you on the spot or anything. Yeah, I'm trying to think of one that it hasn't really been mentioned. Okay, mine is going to be about like spoilers and backseating and things of that nature. Because listen, this might as well be Final Fantasy podcast, because this is going to be about Final Fantasy VII. Guess what? We all know there's this one event that happens in Final Fantasy VII involving a very beloved character, and I knew of that event. What I didn't know when I played it for the first time on stream was when it was going to happen. I had my doubts. It was building up because, you know, that character ends up leaving your party. The dots start to connect and you're like, oh shit, this is going to happen at some point. It took one sad face in my chat to ruin that moment for me, because nothing sad was going on screen. That person had been lovely that entire time. Kind of bordering the line of like, you know, talking about things that are happening / may happen in the near future. But I was like, okay, this is fine. And then we get to that part and nothing is happening in the game, because turns out before that big moment, there's literal silence in the game. It's like the thing, it's building. And then I just see a sad face. I get to that final platform, I look at chat, and I think, well, it's over. And it ruined the moment for me. And I remember, like,
I'm so sorry.
I kind of, yeah, I kind of let that show as well on stream, and I remember kind of complaining about that, and so I'm not looking forward to editing that part of the gameplay. But yeah, and to be fair, it's impossible at this point to not spoil that for yourself, because even if you look up the character, like the first like the first search option on Google is like death. And you're like, oh. And that's how it got spoiled for me to begin with when I was a teenager. But don't do that. Don't comment on things that are not happening at that moment in time. Don't come into a stream and be like, have you met this person yet? Has that person joined your party yet? Has that thing happened? Have you been to this place? Because, like, I'm very spoiler sensitive to the point where I'm annoying. And sometimes I'm like, I suspect that a character is going to join me, but I like the surprise of like, oh my God, they are actually going to join my team. Yay. Awesome. And when people do that, I'm like, no, how dare you? I didn't need to know. I didn't need to know.
Davey brought up a good point. Saying, oh, this part is a spoiler.
Yeah.
It is.
Because it breaks the anticipation.
Yeah.
It lets just like this frowny face. Oh, now I know something bad's about to
Yeah.
happen. Thanks.
Yeah.
Right now I thought I was just walking up a pretty staircase that was covered in crystals and like beautiful light streaming down, and like, but then out of left field, it no longer comes out of left field because you're anticipating it.
Yeah.
So just don't say anything. And also don't talk to other members in chat as if the streamer's not reading chat.
Yeah.
Don't be like, oh, hey, other person in chat, did this part happen yet? Be like, I see that.
This person you need to. Yeah.
Yeah, take it to whispers. How about just don't say anything and react with me in real time?
I'm also like really strict about spoilers in my chat, and I know that this is a very unpopular opinion, a very unpopular perspective to have on spoilers, but it's mine, so I'm going to share it, which is that I think that there's some privilege that comes with like, oh, everybody's already seen this.
Oh,
like,
my God.
Grow up in cultures, like especially movies that belong to white culture. Like I was raised by an immigrant German woman and my dad who is Black, and so I just haven't seen a lot of things that people consider like canon movies in white culture. And with games, this can be even more extreme because not everybody could afford to play these games when they were kids. So I know that it's one of those things like, oh, everybody knows this spoiler though, and I'm like, even still, you should check with everybody and just make sure that they're comfortable talking about the spoilers in the story first, because you never know. And it does frustrate me. My roommate in college was able to play Final Fantasy VII without having been spoiled on anything the whole time.
Imagine that.
And I want more people to be able to have that who haven't played the games all the way through. So that's kind of my perspective with it, and I know that it's very extreme, but
no, I absolutely like I had a good feeling. I knew I adored you for a reason. I've had that exact same rant before, and because people, and this comes from the perspective of someone that lives across the ocean from the United States. Turns out some things never made it here. Some things made it here very late. Sometimes things are more expensive because they're foreign to us, right? And we have kind of like a joke in my community of like, oh, Ruby has never seen anything as far as like movies or sometimes TV shows. And sometimes it's just like my parents didn't really take me to the movies for multiple reasons. And like, or maybe as far as like sometimes Disney Channel stuff, I'm like, I didn't have Disney Channel growing up because it was a premium cable channel and it was more expensive. And I was the only child in the household. So my parents were not about to pay extra for one person. So it's just like sometimes little things like that I think absolutely come from like privilege of like, I'm sorry I didn't play the game when it came out. I'm sorry I didn't pay the full $60 when that game came out a couple months ago. I'm sorry I'm waiting for a sale for it in order for me to play it. So it absolutely comes from privilege, and it absolutely is a very shitty take. I don't care if we're talking about the Titanic. Everybody knows that, the ship is going down, but you don't have to go into details. Like, you don't have to, even if it's the most popular thing in the world, like even the Final Fantasy VII spoiler, there's a reason we're not saying what it is, because I would love if someone is listening to this and being like, ooh, I wonder what that is. And they play Final Fantasy VII without knowing anything that happens in it, and they get destroyed at that moment. I'm so sorry. But that's the reaction I wanted to have. I wanted to bawl my eyes out, and I didn't get to do that. So,
You bring up a really good point with the privilege thing. It's like, I grew up with Disney Channel, original movies, and I grew up with being able to play the games I wanted to play. I mean, I had to use my allowance to buy them, but I still was able to play a lot of games that I know others weren't able to play, and I'm only discovering that now as an adult. I'm like, oh, you never played the original Final Fantasies, like at all? And yeah, our family couldn't afford to have a PlayStation.
Yeah.
I'm like, sad face. Like in my circle of friends, we all had we had multiple versions of the consoles. Like we had our Sega, we had PlayStation 2. Like we were, it's just, yeah, definitely check your privilege. Like I'm coming to realize that now for sure.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like a big thing as well, because sometimes people will also, again, make a big deal out of it and be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. But it's like, I also don't need to have an extreme excuse to not have seen something. Like, maybe I just didn't care to see that at the time or play that at the time. Like, it doesn't mean that you need to yell at me for being like, you've never played this? How dare you? This is culture. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sure you didn't see this one Portuguese show that I grew up with, have you? And I'm not shaming you for it.
Yeah. And who defines this culture?
Yeah.
Oh, this is culture. Who is choosing what is culture here?
Exactly.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII is a monumental game in RPGs and JRPG world of gaming. But you have to remember that it was $50 on the market. That's a lot of money for one game that your parents aren't playing, and that they're probably buying for you if you get the game as a kid. And if your parents don't have a lot of money, and putting food on the table was far more important than you playing a $50 video game. Yeah. I understand why buying Uno for family game nights was more beneficial for my parents to spend money on than buying me a solo copy of FF7
Exactly.
when I was, 13, whatever it was. I was younger than that, but
yeah. I had to rely on my brother because he was the one who he's like 8 or 9 years older than me. So by the time he had like a job, I was growing up, and he would get games for himself a lot of the time, and I would play them, or I would watch him play them if I was too scared, aka Resident Evil. I remember it's really funny because my brother sometimes would have moments of like, it would be a performance of selflessness. He would be like, here's this game that you really want. And I'm like, sweetie, this is Final Fantasy 12. I know for a fact you also want to play it. Don't even try to mask it as if it's something that is for me, when I know for a fact you are going to use your older brother privileges to snatch the PlayStation away from me for like 2 weeks because you want to play the game. Don't even.
Very real.
But there's also privilege with that. You know what I mean? Because it's like, if my brother had moved out immediately at 18, my parents were not gonna buy me games. They weren't gonna do that.
No, I never owned a Super Nintendo, but my friend Shelby did, and I used to beg my mom so I could sleep over Shelby's house and go and play Donkey Kong Country. And so that was definitely Shelby, as far as technology goes, was always more privileged than I was growing up. And so I always wanted to hang out at their place because they had things I didn't have.
Yeah. I love that though. Like that was me growing up. Like my cousin had always a different console than I did. So we always got to experience different things. Like I was over on PlayStation, he was over on Dreamcast. So we got to experience two different sides of gaming in that way. So it was really cute. But everybody kind of needs to be aware of that, especially in 2021. There's so many games either that are recent, there are like backloggings from people and stuff like that. So like just be aware that there's way too much content out there, even outside of gaming, that it's impossible for someone to possibly have watched every single thing and experienced every single thing that you have. And there's nothing wrong with that either. So stop being annoying. Stop yelling at me. But
I thought of my etiquette thing.
Yes.
I just, and it's kind of related to what Andy was talking about earlier. My etiquette thing is just like, for both viewers and streamers, modding and moderating a stream is hard, especially because it's live. Sometimes you have to make some really quick calls, and sometimes those quick calls aren't always the right thing because you err on the side of protecting your space more so than you err on the side of protecting the person who might be infringing upon that space. And so, Andy, like the story that you shared about the person monologuing in your chat, thank you for sharing that, because that can be stuff that's kind of uncomfortable to talk about.
Yeah.
To kind of bring up. It can be something that that is difficult to talk about, but it can be really hard, and you don't know if you overreacted or if the person really was that bad or if you handled it well, even if you did the right thing. And I just want, blanket, I want people to know that moderating is hard, and streamers and mods are real people who struggle with this, and it's okay to feel guilty or bad or upset after an interaction goes wrong. It's just part of being human. Try to forgive yourself, try to forgive the streamer or the audience member if you can, if that's a thing that you're comfortable doing. But yeah, just don't take it out on yourself. Don't get so down on yourself for bad interactions on your stream.
Yeah, we're all just
human.
people.
We make mistakes too.
Yeah. We're just trying our best.
Definitely been times that I know that I've overreacted or reacted in a way that wasn't correct. And I think that as much as I hate reviewing VODs, I do think it helps me. It does help me. Because I'll go back and think, oh my God, that person came in, and I think that my interaction with that raider that came in with their community may have been like a little awkward. Did I fumble around? Like I felt like I was fumbling over my words. How did it sound? I'll go back and watch the clip, and I'm like, oh, it sounded fine. I was just getting in my head again.
Yeah.
Like I didn't make a fool of myself. Like.
Yeah, and the cool thing about streaming as well is that you can look at a VOD that it's a very small percentage of people will go back and watch the full VOD. And the cool thing is that you can watch it and be like, oh, I could do that next time. I could do this instead. I could fix this. I could even like for technical things. I'm like, oh, my audio was too loud, and my community were trying to not make me feel bad, so they didn't say anything, and I was peeking the whole time. Am I kind of upset? Maybe so. But I'm also like, oh, they didn't want to upset me, so they didn't say anything. But yeah, trying to see things from both sides for sure. But that's a really cool thing. Like, especially as I'm editing stuff for YouTube, I'm like, I try to have moments where, if there's a cutscene, maybe I'm not going to interact with someone who's talking about something that has nothing to do with the game. Maybe I'll just immerse myself in the cutscene, allow myself to have that genuine moment of reacting to it and experiencing it. And then if there's a random encounter, I pause the game and I interact with all the chaos and clownery that is going on. And I say that with the most utmost respect to my community. Because it's always clowning time over here, and I love it. But yeah, thank you, both of you, for joining me. This was a lovely conversation. Thank you for having breakfast at Ruby's on this day. Before we go, where can people have, breakfast, dinner, or any kind of meal while they watch your wonderful content? What are the links? Drop the links. Do all the self-promo, any upcoming projects coming up, feel free to do so. So we can start with Andy.
So you can find me on Twitter. I mostly shitpost there, but sometimes I post serious stuff like my schedule. That's Bad Andy Tweets, and I'm on Instagram at AndoShoots, ANDO. I share mostly photography there because I do film photography on the side. That's one of my hobbies. So that's a little more artsy than anything. And then I'm also on TikTok, Bad Andy Talks, TOKS, and you can find me on stream Tuesdays through Saturdays, usually in the evenings, West Coast time, between 5 and 10 p.m. So,
yes.
And no upcoming projects. I am trying to get employed again.
That's
my personal project in life. Streaming is a side adventure.
That's certainly a project. I was going to say that. That's certainly a moment. What about you, Kara?
You can find me on Twitter, Twitch, and TikTok, all under Cheratomo, CHERATOMO. Also, as Andy suggested, I do have a Patreon where I do longer, in-depth narrative analyses of different things. I did some on Persona 5R recently. I'm gonna do one on Final Fantasy VIII, and it's only $2 to get access to those videos, which is also under Cheratomo. And
yes.
Oh, also wait.
Please.
Also, I'm currently working on a game called Onsen Master, which is like Ghibli meets Overcooked, and it's for all ages. So.
Oh my god, I love that.
So go check it out and wishlist it on Steam.
Do that right now. I know what I'm going to be doing after stream. Definitely drop a link on our group chat because I need to wishlist that ASAP.
Same.
That sounds amazing. You can
Thank
find
you, Ruby.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Sorry.
No. Please. Please.
Thank you, Ruby. This was fun.
Yeah. Thank y'all. Thank you. There wouldn't be a podcast without any wonderful guests, and y'all are certainly wonderful guests. So you can find me and all of the clownery that I do, everything at ProjectRuby.eu. She's a professional, Your Honor. A professional clown. It's a shit show every time. I stream a variety of games every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. These podcasts are filmed weekly. Sometimes it's going to be a Monday. Sometimes it's going to be a Tuesday. Whatever availability. Turns out getting 3 people together from different time zones in one stream can be a journey, a challenge, if you will. But I love it. I love it with all my heart and soul, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And you can also find this podcast on your favorite listening platforms. There you go. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of those lovely things. Follow us on there. Do all of that wonderful things. And if you want to be on the podcast, DM me. And definitely leave your comments and suggestions on future topics, guests that you want to see on the podcast, all of that wonderful stuff. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. This is where we're going to sign off. So goodbye.
Bye, friends.